Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Naomi Soustal and I work at Healthy Land and Water, and we deliver some amazing projects, I guess, across southeast Queensland to help protect not only water quality but also the broader catchments that surround our waterways. I've been working there on report cards for roughly the past 12 years or so, and I've seen them change, I guess, over that time. And not only do we report, I guess, on the water quality of our catchments, but also the social and economic benefits that we receive as a result of the water quality within those areas. So I just wanted to firstly just acknowledge that there's a huge group of people who work on water quality monitoring in the Ecosystem Health Monitoring Program, from our member organisations that contribute financially to the program to those that are involved with the research such as the universities. We're also involved with local state government and water utilities, as well as the Science Information Monitoring and broader Healthy Land and Water team. So there's quite a lot of people involved. Historically, the report card focused around water quality and the indicators to get a picture of what the water quality is within the waterways. We've since expanded that to include sort of social indicators around all the benefits of waterways, which include social and economic indicators. So today I'm just going to provide a high-level overview of, or a bit of a snapshot into sort of what the water quality is for Palmerstone Passage, and then David Moffat will just present in a bit more detail on the trends across the waterways and the indicators that we collect data for and report on. So for those of you who live in Palmerstone Passage, I'm sure you all agree it's a wonderful place to live. And for those of us who visit the Palmerstone Passage, it's a great place to go. It's great to take your family, have a picnic by the waterways, undertake exercise, or go for a swim or do your fishing. So these are all the values and I guess the cultural values that we all come to rely on our waterways for. Within the Palmerstone Passage, there's a really high connection with those waterways. So people are reporting that, you know, they're spending a lot of time by their waterways, they're visiting them more than once weekly, which is higher than a lot of the other catchments across the other areas. So because of this, the Palmerstone Passage has received, I guess, a good social benefits rating for its catchments, because people have that satisfaction with the use of their waterways. They're able to access them and use them for the types of activities that they wish to undertake. So generally having those connections too with your waterways means that people love their waterways and they're more likely going to want to protect them, which is a good thing for water quality. And that water quality is closely aligned to, I guess, with, you know, people actually wanting to experience them as well. So people have an inbuilt connection with waterways, and research indicates that blue space can have a really big impact on lowering stress. So those connections that we have are really, really important and great for our well-being. And during the past year of turbulence that we've all experienced, particularly with COVID, when we did our annual survey, we got some really great feedback saying that our waterways provide a calming, therapeutic and restorative effect on people. So they're a nice place for people to find refuge during really difficult and challenging times. And we want to ensure that we protect these values and enable people to enjoy these into the future. So we also understand too that obviously our waterways have an economic benefit. So where we have cleaner waterways, we don't need to treat them to the same extent as dirty waterways, in which case we can save some money on that treatment process. We have industries occurring within our catchments that rely on good water quality. And also tourism, of course, is particularly in areas that are surrounded by water, are really based on those waterways. So ensuring we protect these to protect these values is really important. So we understand that the catchment's under pressure. So obviously there's going to be significant development, population increases across the catchments. And so I guess trying to maintain water quality with those impacts and pressures is going to be really important into the future. Obviously vegetation clearing is going to occur as a result of that, but ensuring that we have areas which remain as refuges is going to be just as instrumental as protecting the broader catchments. So I guess in terms of trends around, if we just look at the very high level, which is the report card grades. So we use the report card grades, they're an A to F rating, and they provide just a very high level overview of what's going on in terms of our waterways. And the reason we do that is so we can start the conversation about our waterways and ways in which we can improve them. But there is a lot of data and a lot of information. So what you see in the report card is just very, very high level. And we have a heap of resources available online where you can actually delve into the water quality results, which is available on our website. And I encourage you all to do so when you get a chance. And I've provided all the links for that in a later slide. So over the years, I guess the report card grade has kind of shifted from sort of a BA grade. It plummeted in 2010. Down to a D grade, which was the first year I actually started working for Healthy Land and Water. I was actually, although that perhaps wasn't such a great outcome, to then see, I guess, all the people and stakeholders come together to then prepare an action plan to try and improve water quality was very encouraging and such a great eye-opener into the wonderful community that we have here across South East Queensland and particularly across the Pumice Passage. So within that stage, I believe it was nitrogen was a big issue, and I'll talk about it a bit more, but it continues to be a bit more, it continues to be a bit of an issue in the passage as well, but perhaps not to the same extent. So I had a quick look. So the report card methodology changed around 2015. So the report card grades aren't necessarily comparable across the whole time series of which the data has been collected. But if you went back, I went back and had a look, I guess, at the estuarine scores to compare them. And roughly those estuarine scores since 2015 have been sitting roughly around that A grade. So generally the water quality at a very high level without delving into the detail and compared to other places across southeast Queensland is actually not too bad. But obviously there's going to be those other pressures and unless we manage it correctly, it is going to have an impact. So looking at the data or the grades currently, so the previous grades I showed were estuarine grades only. These grades are looking at the broader catchment grade, which is how we reported on the water quality. So it combined the freshwater, the estuarine, marine into the report card grade. And so it's roughly been sitting around a B minus to A minus these past 5 years. But as I mentioned earlier, nitrogen continues to be a bit of an issue. Particularly across the northern part of the passage. So there is exceedance or ongoing exceedances, I guess, of the guideline values against which we measure the nitrogen. And this is particularly in last year, there were some issues around Bells Creek, and it seems to be a bit problematic in terms of nitrogen. And hopefully Dave might be able to explore that a bit further with you. So I guess nitrogen in the system's not overly great. If you've got too much of it, it can spur on plant growth and algae and clog up the waterways, and also can draw, because of those plants and decomposition, it can draw the oxygen out of the water, which then causes problems obviously for the other animals which are living within those waterways. So it causes all-round water quality problems. However, there are other elements that we've added into the report card. So we've added in sediment or pollutant loads and sediment and nutrients as well as habitat. So habitat measures that we've include riparian extent as well as wetland extent. So the riparian looks at, I guess, what was originally, or the 50-metre buffer zone along the waterways, which you'd expect to see. And we currently, within the Pumice Passage, have about we've retained about 90% of that, which is quite high compared to other southeast Queensland catchments. And also, it's quite high in terms of wetlands as well. So we've retained about 92% of pre-cleared wetlands. And I've included the Wetland Info website up there if you want to go in and have a look at the data which underpins that through Mike Ronan's group. So seagrass, there's 2 sites that have been measured in terms of seagrass, one to the north of the passage and one a bit further south. The seagrass has been retained in these areas, which has been wonderful. It's nice to see that hasn't disappeared. And the depth at which it occurs, whilst it perhaps isn't above the guideline values, it's still plugging along. We've seen a slight increase this year in terms of the seagrass. That's not seagrass extent, that's just the depth at which the seagrass occurs. So in terms of pollutant loads, there's not a huge amount of pollutant loads that are generated from the land that runs into the waterways. So these are modelled from the catchments, and it looks at the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus and sediment, or total suspended solids which end up in our waterways. And for Pumice Passage, these aren't particularly high, particularly compared to other catchments a little bit further north, which under, I guess, intense rainfall, they see quite a lot of these pollutants entering our waterways. So that's not been a particularly high issue for this particular catchment. So I guess just with that high level of in terms of the water quality stuff, I guess it's really important that we manage Pumice Passage adequately to ensure that those ongoing pressures don't have an ongoing impact on the waterways and we don't see another decline in water quality. So obviously we've heard about a lot of great projects that have been delivered across the passage. There's a lot of community groups, there's litter cleanups, there's oyster restoration, all sorts of things which are happening, and it's great to see that ongoing. And having a strategic approach, I guess, to how this is undertaken is really important. So I'm quite excited to see that the action plan that's been going now for a number of years is due now for an update as part of this convergence. And so I guess I've just written up some of the types of management actions that you might like to consider if they're not already in there. Looking at development controls, particularly with the amount of extended development that's likely to occur. Working with industries and agriculture, forestry, and also the developers to try and reduce impacts on water quality moving forward, and applying best practice management to these industries, as well as ensuring that these key habitats are protected. So far in the passage, we know that the extent is still pretty good. The actual condition of those habitats, though, we don't actually measure that through this program at the moment. So having a good understanding of the actual condition of these habitats would be worthwhile also. So I guess in terms of where Healthy Land and Water is heading with sort of future reporting and monitoring, obviously I'm hoping that by the end of the conference everyone's heard about the NRM plan that we're looking at updating to improve the information and help provide strategic direction for improvements of not just water quality but broader catchments as well. So we are looking at incorporating sort of a new monitoring framework which incorporates this broader scope of works and looking at adding in leading indicators that look at the management that's being undertaken and what that might mean for water quality into the future. So by, I guess, applying these within the program, we're hoping that we can really strengthen our knowledge and understanding and improve water quality, not just for Pumice Passage, but other catchments across southeast Queensland. So thank you. I'll just pass over to Dave Moffat.
Right. I'm going to give a really quick summary of... I've got 10 minutes left? Yep, good. I'm going to give a really quick summary of about 15 years worth of water quality monitoring up and down the passage. Involves about 2,000 water quality samples or visits, multiple water quality samples per occasion. Right, so the work that I'm involved in is basically the data collection for what Naomi was talking about, the Ecosystem Health Monitoring Program. That's been going on for close to 20 years now. We have two components to that. One's the freshwater component. We have 5 sites within the catchments draining into the Pumice Passage, and we have 10 sites that are along the passage itself. Now, during this presentation, I'll present some results which are plotted up from north to south. So if you just consider where those points are there, with the last 3 or 4 there being around the mouth of Coochin Creek. Here's some results. So if I just draw your attention to the plot there on the second row on the bottom. No, I'm just kidding. There's an easier way to do this. We need to summarise this. There's a lot of data here, a huge amount. In fact, this is just the surface water quality. We actually do profiles down the water column as well. So what I'm going to do is just show you some results which are based on these 4 attributes, whether the water quality is compliant with guidelines, how much it exceeds it, by a peak and its mean as well, and also what its usual deviation from the water quality guidelines are. Now, those water quality guidelines are something that are man-made, they're human-created. We change them at times depending upon what our priorities are and what our management objectives are. Obviously, water quality differs according to what your interests are and what you're particularly looking at. So this is a general overview in relation to the water quality guidelines, and those guidelines are likely to change in the near future. Something to remember during this is that there's a net movement of water from the south of the passage to the north. Now, here's the juicy bit. So there's a bunch of water quality parameters: dissolved oxygen, total phosphorus, filterable reactive phosphorus, chlorophyll A, total nitrogen, ammonia, nitrogen oxides, and turbidity. And they're ranked according to my water quality index based on those parameters we saw before about how much they deviate from the water quality guidelines. And it gives you an indication of which ones are deviating the most and when. So we've got a timeline then from 2003 to 2007. We see something like filterable reactive phosphorus usually is really good. But the interesting thing about Pumicestone Passage is we get really big peaks, which are not artifacts of the lab or something like that. They persist for a certain amount of time and then they disappear. Some of it's rainfall driven, and other parts of it, I've got no idea why it occurs in that fashion. So Al told us all about mud, so I won't talk too much about turbidity. I'll talk about the two darkest red bits apart from that, which is the nitrogen oxides and the filterable reactive phosphorus. Nitrogen oxides, you can see there's a time series there. The plots are arranged. The x-axis is distance up the passage from south to north. And then there's a plot for every year there. I've just put a tick and a cross there as to which were the reasonably good years, which were the not so good years. So you can see that 2008 through to 2013, we had enormous peaks in NOx along the passage, and mysteriously it just disappeared. It has reoccurred in recent months. It went away for a couple of years, and it has come back just, I think, in the last 3 months of last year. Filterable reactive phosphorus, quite a different pattern. So they're not related in terms of where they occur or when they occur. So the filterable reactive phosphorus, actually, if I go back just one there, the peaks in NOx tend to occur there from the mouth of Coochin Creek to the north as the water comes out of Coochin Creek and then flows to the north. With filterable reactive phosphorus, it's generally the water coming in from Deception Bay that's carrying the nutrient load there. And most of the time, so if I can highlight, say, 2012 there's a very big load coming into the passage, but it gets processed and declines as you go along the passage. So when you're considering management of the passage, it's not just the passage itself, it's also parts outside, such as Deception Bay and the waters draining into Deception Bay. Apart from nitrogen FRP, Rainier Mam will talk tomorrow about pesticides. There's been quite a few pesticide exceedances in the past related to water coming out of Coochin Creek catchment. Take-home messages. The good thing is that while there was a bit of a pattern of decline, as Naomi pointed out, it has now become, that pattern has broken down. So we can't say whether the water quality in the passage is getting better or worse. It is just variable at the present. One of the big things is, as Naomi mentioned, you can't fit everything into a regional report card. I'm now involved in regional report cards for South East Queensland, Mackay, dry tropics and the wet tropics. And when you're trying to communicate results to the general public and politicians, you need to keep things really concise. We can't fit everything in, and unfortunately, we also need to try to keep things consistent across space so we can do comparable, get a comparison across space as to which are the good areas and which are the bad areas. So FRP and NOx are not things that we really have issues with in a large number of other estuaries, and they're not counted in the report card. So as Naomi said before, there's a wealth of information that's involved on water quality and other aspects of the condition of Pumicestone Passage, and sometimes you need to do a little bit of digging to really find the nitty-gritty. But in general, I'd agree with Naomi that the water quality within the passage is not in a declining state, and it's what you'd call a moderately disturbed system. All right, thank you.